Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Global Legal Tech Talks, delivered in partnership with Thomson Reuters. I'm Frances Anderson, CEO of Net Law Media, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to today's session. So today, we're looking at the 2026 UK legal market report, where growth is and what it takes to win it. So the UK legal market is growing, but not equally. Drawing on Thomson Reuters Institute's 2026 State of the UK Legal Market, the most comprehensive annual study of the UK legal buyer sentiment and spend, this session reveals where demand is concentrating, what clients say they actually need from their outside counsel, and why the firms they trust are those that bring commercial judgment, not just legal expertise. Before I move on to introduce our chair, as a reminder, this is a live session and we encourage your participation. So please do share your questions via the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, or the chat function. And we'll aim to address as many as possible through the session today. Now, I am delighted to introduce our chair for today, which is Ben Firth. Ben is the Client Solutions Director at Thomson Reuters. He drives customer success across Thomson Reuters' legal tech portfolio in the UK and Europe. Since joining through the HiQ acquisition in 2018, Ben has scaled HiQ sales and now leads a multi-product client solution team. With 20 years in legal tech and AI, from technical consulting to enterprise sales, Ben has pioneered customer success methodologies at Thomson Reuters and championed the integration of AI platform counsel Legal. So please join me in welcoming Ben. Ben, it's over to you.
Wow, that is a fantastic introduction. I think we should just stop there. Thank you for that introduction, Francis. It's a pleasure to host this session this afternoon. We've got about an hour, and we've got a lot to get through, and unpacking a really great report that's been delivered by our Thomson Reuters Institute. Yep, my name is Ben Firth, and I'm going to introduce the panel in a second. We'll get the panel to introduce themselves. But really, just to set the frame of the next hour, we've got some slides, we've got some really great ideas to talk about, and we're going to start to go through the information that we get from this report and take it in pieces and talk about it and hopefully get some interaction from yourself. So during the next hour, if you have a cup of tea and you're taking notes, we're going to throw some questions on the board as well, just to gauge your reaction, just to gauge your understanding about where we're at with this market. So before we get into this, let's jump into the panel itself, and let's start with Adam. Do you want to say hello and just give a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Hello, everyone. My name's Adam Kerr. I'm the founder and managing partner of Primus Law. We are a kind of boutique commercial law firm. There's about 60 of us across a variety of commercial disciplines, and we've been using some of TR's Gen AI tools for, I would say, coming on 2 years or so now, Ben, I think.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Relatively new firm, about 2013 you founded, I think.
Yeah. Relatively embryonic in the grand scheme of some of these big beasts, but yes.
The big beast, punching above your weight, I'm sure. Dale, say hello. You're on mute. You failed the first test.
Ah, failed the first test. Excellent. Hi, Dale Hodgkinson. Been in legal for nearly 30 years. I've worked in small, medium, and large, and just recently shifting into a consultancy role, having left Slaughter and May as head of their strategy and architecture for 12 and a half years.
Fantastic. We'll probably get into that. We'll talk about a bit of international trade and so forth. And finally, before we get to Lucy, Sam Dixon, say hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, as Ben said, I'm Sam Dixon. I'm Chief Innovation Officer and Partner at Womble Bond Dickinson. We are a transatlantic law firm. Been around since a little bit longer than 2013. I think we can trace some of our roots back to about 1400, according to certain historians. So quite a long way. But we also use some of Thomson Reuters Gen AI products, and really looking forward to the conversation today around the state of the UK legal market.
Fantastic. Thank you. And then finally, Lucy, are you able to say hello and just introduce yourself?
Hi. Yes, thanks, Ben. So I'm Lucy Leach, Research Strategy Director at the Thomson Reuters Institute. Is the dedicated research and leadership arm of TR. So I spend my days designing and analysing research and insights to help inform the way forward. But today we're going to be focused specifically on the legal market. So Ben, anything, or shall I just crack
I
straight
think we
on.
chose. I deliberately chose you last so we could come straight into the flow of delivering some of your really good information. What I will say, what's really good about today, before we jump into it, is that often when we see these reports come to market, you know, the British pessimist about us probably thinks, really, is that really the data? Is that really the answer? So what we thought we'd do is blend the data, the report with the panel to really gauge some of those comments and that sentiment from the report and make some sense of it and make some sort of explanation of it as we go through. So, Lucy, over to you for the first slide.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'm going to be drawing today on some unique detailed data from the client side. So each year our talented research team carry out interviews with over 2,500 general counsels around the world. And 260 of those GCs are based in the UK. So we focus on three topics today. So where growth in legal work is going to be focused this year in the UK market, what clients need from firms to support that work. And then thirdly, of course, we can't leave without talking about AI. So after each of those, pause for some panel discussion. And as Ben mentioned, we'll be throwing in a couple of polls along the way. So for firms, growth in legal services is there, but where in the rosy past it might have been easy to find, it's now a little more elusive. So we've got three stats here. So the +5 net spend shows us that the market is positive but cautious. So our net spend anticipation metric is the percentage of buyers, so in-house counsel, who are planning to increase their legal spend in the next year, minus those planning to decrease. So +5 means that the market is still growing. We've got, but only 5 percentage points more buyers plan to increase than decrease. So those easy growth conditions have passed. The +20 entry, so this is showing that it's where the opportunity for firms is particularly concentrated. So 28 percentage points more buyers plan to increase regulatory spend than decrease it. And that's the standout across different types of work. Harder for firms to find, and clients are also raising the bar on what they need. So only 21% are highly satisfied with the innovation of and that's a stat we're going to come back to a bit later on. So to drill down into those figures just a little bit more, regulatory, we're always at +28. Labour and employment is at +14. So they're both above the zero mark, suggesting that, you know, we are expecting increased spend in those areas. And that's driven by, you know, what clients are telling us right now. We've got a regulatory environment that's more complex, more global, faster moving than anything they've dealt with before. So they need advice from firms. At the other end, though, you've got insurance at -8, IP and disputes both on the decline. So it's not to say that there isn't those works out there, but quite often clients are looking to decrease spend in that area. Finance sector clients, though, are a pattern, but even more concentrated. So it is very much that there's need for certain types of legal advice in certain pockets of the market. And we can't forget either that the international nature of the UK market. So out of these interviews with 260 GCs based in the UK market, the majority, so 4 out of 5, have needs for legal advice in other countries as well. So they are really expecting firms to be able to offer some kind of international capability, whether it's as you know, as part of the firm, whether it's as a network or a best friends relationship. that, I will pass over to Ben to
Wow, thank you,
get the conversation
Lucy. That's
started.
great. That's a great start. Some really great data points there. I will say, just for the hopefully for the audience, that maybe it's not me, that Lucy's broadband is a bit intermittent sometimes. So some of the coverage is coming a bit jittery sometimes. But we definitely know where what was being discussed there. Okay, so let's just unpack some of this a little bit. What struck me first of all was just something that you said there, around that post-pandemic boom. And it's almost like a bit of a history here around, let's go backwards to go forwards. If you guys think individually about your firms and where they were during that pandemic period, to is that true? Was there a huge surge of industry and work in that kind of the pandemic period, or how was that for you? Because I was told many years ago that law firms are in the industry that's indestructible. And what I mean by that is when the economy's good, people are growing, they are doing deals, they need lawyers to help them drive their business forward. When the economy's bad, people are getting divorced, people are trying to sell their houses, and people are murdering people. So they need a lawyer. So I was always told that quite early on in my days. But that pandemic period, if I recall, in my space was very, very busy. Now, was it busy for you guys back then? Can you recall those strange days? I mean, Adam, for you, you were probably in the heart of it, thinking your firm's only just got going. 2013, you're up and running, and then you roll straight to how was that period for you?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was very busy because clients turn to trusted advisors in difficult times like that to get good advice. Nobody really had a clear sense of having. Nobody had to go through this before, and so I think clients needed help with strategic things and day-to-day things. And
Yeah.
I think if you've got good relationships with your clients, then they often go to the lawyers as a first port of call. So we definitely saw some of that during that period.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess from an international stage, Sam, from your side, can you recall, what you were doing at that stage, and how busy were you?
Well, I think there's a few things on that boom as it's been described coming out of the pandemic. I mean, at the time, I was restructuring an insolvency partner, so there is absolutely no doubt at all that I was flat out for the entire period, as was everyone I could see around me. But I think as we came out of the pandemic, one of the things that might or might not be right, but I think is an interesting perspective on the data, is there was a lot of activity paused during the pandemic. Adam's absolutely right. I completely agree with him. People needed a lot of help, perhaps with some things that were new and that were different to what they would need day to day. But there was a lot of transactional activity that perhaps was put on hold for a period and didn't happen in the same way. So as we came out of the pandemic, there was an increase in demand as some of that suppressed transactional activity unwound.
Yeah. And has things leveled down now from a business, continuity perspective in terms of that sort of, let's call it forecasting and revenue challenges?
I think from my perspective, we're still seeing loads of opportunities, to be honest, Ben. I mean, I saw the data as part of the prep for this, and I'm surprised it's lower than straight after the pandemic when things were unwinding. Not particularly, but
yeah.
I am still seeing, and we are still seeing plenty of opportunities. So I'm a little bit surprised it's where it's at.
Good. Okay. Well, look, let's look at another data point there, which I think is quite fascinating. Only 21% of UK buyers are highly satisfied with firms' innovation capabilities. Now, I've often questioned this sort of data before. I know we're 9 minutes in, and we're going to say the term AI, and we'll get to that. But before the obsession around AI, were firms being questioned around their innovation capabilities in that sort of satisfaction survey? I mean, Dale, from your perspective, from where you were at recently, did you ask for measurements on that?
I'm going to be careful of being specific about Slaughter and May because I think it's inappropriate just as that firm. What I will say is obviously I was in the marketplace and a couple of things. I guess it's as new technologies come out, it can be quite opaque because people are upskilling and lawyers are being expected to be consultants on products as much as being lawyers.
Yeah.
And that could be quite challenging. And I think I know certainly on the catch-up call previously, Adam has said that trying to keep that pace of people educated outside of just the lawyering part is quite a challenge, and that changes the advice point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lucy, if I may, can I ask you to put slide 4 back on where we were talking about regulatory increase, labour employment increase in terms of the anticipated practice area spends? That's great. Thank you. So if we just move into this space here, right-hand side, international work. Now, obviously, Sam, you're working for an international firm itself. When you look at some of those data points, what's your first reaction around what the trend and the reaction, the survey was coming back with?
Personally, I think it's really exciting because what it does is reinforce what I thought and what we thought the position was. And we became transatlantic back in 2017 when we merged with Womble Carlisle to become Womble Bond Dickinson. But we're still working on our international capability. We've added strategic alliances. We're part of an international network of independent law firms as well, because we do recognise that capability is there. I perhaps wouldn't have realised that the UK international spend intent for international outpaces US and global average. That perhaps surprised me a little bit, but I guess the nature of our market, the nature of London and its time zone, I can see how that is the case, and that English law ends up becoming increasingly central the more and more globalized the world is, albeit we are obviously seeing some headwinds against that globalization. So whether some of this will reverse over time remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know there's some of the attendees on today's session are coming from in-house counsel, and so they could be working for multinational brands who have huge aspirations, and from a real growth potential from a UK and outwards, brands are growing and they need legal advice along the way, right? So say 82% of UK buyers have cross-border needs. And so that's a great sign for the UK economy in the main, I would say, and great sign for legal work. But if we look at the section on the left-hand side there around that regulatory and labour employment, so, Lucy, just so we're clear really from the data that you created here, what we're saying here is we're moving forwards into 26 and beyond. But essentially, firms and in-house are really focusing an increasing amount on spending in regulatory advice and legal work with their partners, and also obviously increase in employment, but they're spending less or focusing less on the insurance work and disputes. Is that fair? Sort of real basic layman's explanation. Hopefully, is able to come off.
Yes, that's fair. And obviously, themselves don't have a crystal ball, but it's where they think they're going to be spending more or less in the coming year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a first poll, actually. I thought it'd be a great time just to throw it on the screen. So can I ask just to have that poll to come up that we thought we'd just ask a question really on that point itself is within that 2026, if I read the question out, how is your firm responding to the shift in market conditions? Looking at what we've seen our data here, does that resonate with what you're looking at? So are you doubling down on that high growth areas of regulatory and labour? Are you investing in technology capabilities? Focusing on client relationships and depth and breadth, which we're going to come on to shortly into our next section, or you're still assessing the strategy on the ground? So have a look at those questions, have a think about it, and feel free to answer one, and then we will. I'm not going to answer it because I might just skew. Mine just popped up. I won't answer that. It might just skew the data slightly. But it'd be really interesting to understand your perspective of that. Regulatory, are we in danger? Are we as a nation, as an industry, tying ourselves up in more and more regulatory advice and guidance and laws and governance? I mean, Adam, from your side, how much of that work are you seeing in your space?
Yeah, plenty. But Ben, I'm going to ignore your question just for 1 second and just comment and just make an observation on the employment work.
Sure.
Because employment teams tend to be busy because clients are taking particular steps with employees, reducing workforces, taking tougher lines. There is more regulatory compliance in the employment space, as we all know, from a legislative perspective. But it will be interesting to see to what extent that increased employment work is an indicator of other things going on in the market. Because my employment team and other employment teams we talk about, they are busy helping clients through processes, and those processes usually aren't growth orientated.
Oh, Adam, I think you put yourself on mute there, potentially by accident.
I did. That was just because I'd finished, Ben. I thought you were gonna follow up at that point.
Sorry, I was listening and absorbing it. Sorry. Yeah,
I'm a
I think
concise speaker.
you very much are. Well, just speaking of being concise and on time, we've got their polls come back now from the results. So 43% of you are saying you're investing in innovation and technology capabilities. And then right down at the bottom, 7% have said that you are doubling down on the high growth areas like regulatory. Very interesting. So really people are not thinking too much about the outside world, but more maybe concentrating on their own technologies and their own capabilities within their own challenge. So that's quite interesting. And that's probably going to lay nicely into the next section, Lucy, as we roll back into your slide deck, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought if I switch off my video, apologies about my internet connection. It's typical, isn't it? I haven't had problems all week, but I thought if I switch my video off, then maybe it might help. So apologies for that. So moving on then to look at what in a bit more detail about how clients need firms to work with them. So again, sort of bringing it back to the client, UK legal departments are increasing the pressure from within their own organisations to offer more than just technically correct advice. So they need to take a much more commercial view. So they need to support their business growth. They need to connect their advice to commercial out in general, to act as a strategic partner to the rest of the C-suite. So I think it's then unsurprising that they need their firms to support them in doing that. And increasingly what we're seeing is that they're showing a preference for firms that they say are able to translate that technical legal advice into something that's looks much more like practical guidance. And it takes into account, the industry context they're sitting in, what their organization is trying to achieve overall, and their internal, their unique risk tolerance they are comfortable with. So just in the same way that they are expected to deliver this to their C-suite, they need them along the way. And that sort of stretches beyond the sort of paid for legal matters. And kind of takes a step back. So these themselves also need to be proactive rather than reactive. They need to be anticipating risks that are on the horizon. And in this ever-changing world, risks are coming up faster than ever. But what the research showed was that fewer than half of those UK clients that we interviewed, so just 41%, say that external counsel, so law firm briefings, are a highly valuable source of information. And to me, that's quite a strikingly low number, given how much resource firms do put into these kind of proactive client communications. And it tells us, unfortunately, that quite a lot of what is currently being sent out is not landing as useful. I think the GC quote that we've got on the slide kind of says it plainly. There's too much general, it's almost information overload, and it's not kind of tailored enough. And clients really want something different. And I think if law firms can't deliver that, they'll be increasingly looking to, trying to create their own AI tools that's going to help them to kind of sift through, which I think is a missed opportunity for firms. So what this should look like in practice, we've got sort of 5 priorities on it to give you a little bit more depth in this. What clients are saying they need: same day context rich updates, so moving beyond generic alerts to immediate guidance with clear industry and client specific implications. So not a monthly newsletter, something that tells them what this development means for their business today. And I fully appreciate that is something that's easier said than done to move that quickly. They want to have embedded what to do next guidance. So every update needs to include something, a concise, actionable takeaway that helps the clients make decisions in real time. So it's not the information itself that's the value, that it's about what to do with it. Then having sort of client-specific risk intelligence, and maybe this is somewhere where firms themselves can use AI. So tailored kind of calendars, horizon scans that are aligned to what we know the client actually needs, where their priorities are, where their exposure is. And having an opportunity for rapid response channels, so clients can triage issues as they arrive. So accessibility is really part of the value proposition now as well. And then what the final thing that we recommend is to track those things that you are sending out. Track engagement, timeliness, relevance, and adapt based on what the clients are actually using and what they value. So with that, I will hand back to Ben for a bit more discussion on about how do firms tackle this and provide more strategic and tailored clients.
Thank you. So it's really clear. We've got kind of two subjects here. We've got the subject of the GC world and what they expect and what their challenges are, but also from the private practice world. In my eyes, is how are you promoting yourself and how are you meeting those demands? So for example, horizon scanning, staying ahead of the market and giving that advice and guidance. We're seeing quite a lot of that sort of discussion pop up again now around how they're looking at ways to give that elevated service to their clients. Dale, from your perspective of that legal knowledge, how would you combat that, and how would you think about giving that sort of extra service to a private, your in-house counsel, for example?
So I'm going to go back many years where I was going to do consultancy via a law firm. And at the time, this is way before ABS and LLP and other things. And one of the big challenges was, well, we're insured to provide legal advice. And the minute you started to deviate out of that, it started to get more muddy onto how you were insured as a business. And are you starting to... So what you tended to find is the advice would get more fluffy the less legal based it was, because the risk was higher that if you then got pinpointed on that advice you've given, you've all of a sudden given advice that's not specific legal but much broader, which I think creates a cultural shift. Right now, you've got so many business models that allows you to adjust the different types of assurance and insurance you can have, maybe bringing different people to the table, because I think I said a sketch where some years ago it was about two teachers talking about their day, and they said, oh my goodness, today I had to teach, because there were so many other jobs they were having to do, rather than having people who are experts in the different facets. I think I get why the general counsel is asking for this, but there is a breach over into the sort of Capgemini markets and the Big Four and other spaces that are also doing this. And I guess it's trying to find that sweet spot, that happy balance where the lawyer is comfortable, the structure of the business is comfortable for the advice they give. And if this isn't meeting, then I think there needs to be a grown-up conversation of why, egos to the curve, and how do we then fill that gap, rather than just assuming you must fill it. That's now, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm saying that in quite a unbiased, outside looking in perspective. But I think it's a challenge, right? Because you're going to get different lawyers. Some will love to give future advice. Some are going to be like, well, I just want to give legal advice. That's what I studied law for.
Do you find now, maybe Adam and Sam, for you guys, are you recruiting differently at the moment for that kind of challenge? Are you looking at your influx of people, junior, mid, and senior, and looking at how their portfolio, their knowledge, their backgrounds, because of the demands the clients are asking for, is more than just legal advice now?
I mean, I'm not sure this is a particularly kind of new news story. I think clients have always wanted this. I think what historically perhaps lawyers have been more reluctant to nail their colours to the mast, to give a firm opinion, to give pragmatic advice. And those lawyers that were comfortable doing that and able to do it stood out. I think the market shift that if there's one happening, is that clients are being more insistent on getting this. I think they're less willing to accept the 10-page email that doesn't give a view at the end of it, or doesn't provide pragmatic advice at the end of it. So I think the desire hasn't changed. What I think perhaps has changed is the bullishness with which clients are pursuing what they want in terms of advice, opinion, pragmatism, those kinds of things.
Is that because it's so much more competitive now in the legal space? So a buyer, let's say a buyer, they can literally walk down the street and approach pretty much not any firm, but a multitude of firms to try and solve their challenge. Whereas maybe in years gone by, there was known brands that were good at that, known regions that were good at that, and so forth. So is it really a buyer's market now in the legal world? Sam, from your side, when you're pitching for work, are you competing against lots of other different outfits than you would previously?
I think that's a really interesting question, Ben. I mean, I completely agree with what Adam was saying around this not necessarily being a new point per se. I mean, it's always been the case that good advice to clients, if we're talking about advice perhaps rather than the horizon scanning side of things, isn't given in a silo. It should be given in that strategic context, and I don't think there is anything new there. But what I think is perhaps changing, I'll come back to the competition points in a second, but what I think is changing, without jumping us ahead too much, is AI. So what we are starting to see, what people are anticipating, clients are anticipating, is that AI will increasingly do some of the execution, and therefore people are looking to take your recruitment point, Ben, at what skills people are going to need in the future. And they are starting to think, right, well, what skills are going to be least impacted by AI? What skills are going to be most valuable? And actually, a lot of those skills are what might be described as sort of the old-fashioned trusted advisor type skills that play exactly into this space. So will firms be looking for this as an increasingly weighty component of what they're looking for in their recruits? I think the answer to that's probably yes. On the competition piece, I mean, I don't remember a day when things weren't fiercely competitive, to be honest with you. I think that's always been the case. Do we see a broader range of organizations, consortiums and things like that? Yes, but that's a story that's been around for a while now. I wouldn't say that's particularly new. The next round will be the truly disruptive new entrants that are AI native, and that's when we'll start to see another chapter in that ever competitive arena.
Yeah, I think
just
so.
On that, I do think that this, AI is, kind of always part of the conversation at the moment, isn't it? And I think that this desire for commercial pragmatism and proper advice, as I would view it, I think is only going to intensify, because as the AI tools that clients and in-house counsel can avail themselves of gets better, actually they need less of the technical advice. They're going to be more and more able to get that themselves. What they're going to need is interpretation and practical application. And so I think this is going to continue to shift as that kind of AI piece develops.
Can I also give a curveball?
Yeah, sure.
Because you've already mentioned the pandemic. During the pandemic, lawyers generally, I see all of a sudden being more arm in arm alongside their clients and going, how are we going to get through this together? Which kind of set the tone of, well, we can do this together. So although, as you say, AI is now magnifying that further, I do think the pandemic started to make that quite differential shift, because prior to that, it was quite, well, we do this, you do that. Whereas during the pandemic, it's like, well, it's for every firm, right? It was all both personally and as commercially. You go, we're all arm in arm. We've got to find a way through this. And maybe that was where, to your point, I know about it being a bit more boisterous now. It is, well, they know it's possible. Well, that was demonstrated during the pandemic. It's just now it's also needed because we've got another pandemic, if you like, the AI pandemic, right? Which is again something that is being thrust upon the world around us rather than something we've all necessarily wanted to choose or run into. I know some people would love to run into it, but again, for some people, this is probably as daunting as being locked in. Just as a bit of a, so I mean, if yourselves agree, please do say so.
Yeah, I think it's a great observation. And just looking at observations, there was a slide that Lucy had there. Only 41% of UK buyers finding external counsel briefings highly valuable. And one GC has put it bluntly that everyone's dumping you with general information. Law firms need to get smarter. Is that fair? And then how are you mitigating that? If only 41% of the buyers are saying this is valuable information, this is valuable advice, how does a law firm prepare for that? And how do they try and be the best they can be? We at Thomson Reuters, we're very much in that kind of state of always learning and always developing. So we're trying to train and develop each other individually and as a business. And do law firms do that to stay ahead of the market? I mean, Adam, from your side, the way your law firm is today and where you obviously want to get to, how do you stay ahead of the market in legal advice and guidance?
Well, historically, it was to stand out by providing very kind of pragmatic, commercially grounded advice and being prepared to say what you think. I think as that desire, maybe that USP will dilute as it becomes more and more the norm that people want that. But I think that's certainly been agility in terms of service delivery, technology use, outputs. That's what we talk about here is delivering outputs. We don't really we don't talk about it in terms of advice or kind of a transactional milestone or whatever. We deliver things to clients. Just so happens that it's advisory in nature, and I think that maybe that kind of mentality and that culture which is ingrained in us has stood us in good stead. But you're absolutely right. You've got to listen to if a client's saying to you, this piece of work that you've given to me isn't of much use, you've really got to pay attention to that. And if it's a systemic thing, and clients, if 41% of your client base are telling you that the things you deliver them aren't really worthwhile, you've got a serious problem, haven't you?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, Lucy, if you could put slide 7 on just to remind people what I was just quoting, just from one of the data points that came back from your survey. I just think that's really interesting. I mean, I guess from looking at that slide there, Sam, on the right-hand side there, what clients need from firms. These are the things that the reports come back and they are asking for. Now, when I look at that, I see immediately, client management 101, right? That is, from my perspective, having worked in the legal tech space for years, when I try and provide a service to my clients, I'm looking at those sorts of comments and going, right, this is how I do it. Now, has a law firm, or are you as a law firm shifting into that kind of delivery to keep in tune with client demands, or do you present this as one of your methodologies? How do you go about managing clients?
I think, as you said, Ben, it's always right to listen to your clients and see what they are asking for, what's working for them, what isn't, and then frankly to work with them to try and find solutions. I think in terms of some of the things that are on there, I don't think any of that is particularly unusual. I think I can understand why people are asking for those kinds of things. You said originally around the sort of the same day bit perhaps being a little challenging to deliver depending on the nature of it. But I think what's important and what's perhaps been unlocked again by AI is some of the tailoring piece, because historically, however tailored someone's legal updates and horizon scanning was, there was always an element of it was produced, it was distributed. It was hard en masse for many clients to tailor updates in that way. That is becoming increasingly easy to do because you can give an entire client service team the ability to tailor something to what a client is asking it to be tailored for, whether that's on style or content or risk appetite or whatever else. Does it work perfectly? No, but those options are there for people to explore.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I've been speaking to a lot of GCs recently, and a lot of them kind of joke saying that, the actual practice of law is only a small percentage of their daily lives now when they're working within in-house. They're seen as those trusted advisors, those the lean on, they're pulled to the board table, they're pulled into big meetings, they are giving advice to all sorts of different people. And more often than not, they don't have the experience in that space, and they're learning on the fly, really, and on the go. And I'm hoping that they would then come to you guys as law firms and say, hey, have you ever had that situation? And that's that sort of relationship you want, right, with your clients. I mean, Adam, you going back to one of your pillars of your firm and that service you give to your clients, is that sort of service you try and layer upon the legal advice as well?
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
But I think going back to your original question about how do you react to these kind of things that client want, I think the main thing is you've got to be brave enough to ask the question. Lawyers can be quite guilty about thinking that we know best. In no other service delivery channel are you as resistant or reticent to take on board client feedback as in the professional services space. And I think we've got to be very interactive with our clients and say, look, how did that go? What did you think? What was good? What was bad? Did you get what you need? Do you need us to do something different? And you're trained, aren't you, sometimes not to ask a question you don't already know the answer to. And I think when it comes to service delivery and managing your way through these changing times, I think you've got to ask some unnervy questions and be prepared to take the answers at face value and do something with the feedback.
Yeah, that's fair.
Part of my studies, again, I think we're missing a stage gate. As much as GC are seen as your client, the GC is representing a company. So what I used to do, for example, is if I was dealing with, I knew there was medtech companies, I would go to medtech events and I would sit there on the ground listening to what people are saying. I used to go to GovTech, FinTech, because again, a bit like lawyers, no offense, if you solve the client of the lawyer will generally step in line. And I should imagine if you solved, and the GCs might shoot me for this, but if you solve the client of the GC, which is ultimately the business they're in, well, that ultimately gives them what they want. And I think, to your point, Adam, we're always trying to second guess the person in front of us when often the real person asking the question is the person in front of them. And so it's all about trying to be in that secondary ecosystem. You're almost, rather than it's often never the person in front of you. That question's coming from somewhere else, right? And it's trying to answer the secondary question.
And also visualize the challenge further ahead, one step ahead, maybe, as if that lawyer's asked me the question, what is the real knock-on impact of that challenge for that person?
If the GC asked me to be removed, I understand.
I had a conversation with a GC once, and we were talking about what he needed from us, and I think his comment was meant to be slightly facetious and tongue-in-cheek, but I said, what do you need me to do? And he said, make me look good.
Fair.
And
there you go.
To Dale's point, and I think sometimes there's a bit of that, and that can apply where the person instructing you is a CFO or a CTO in a kind of whatever it is. But I suspect there's always a degree of that going on, isn't there? No matter who the nature of your client is.
Absolutely. So looking on this slide here, I thought it's a great segue that one of the comments there is what clients need from firms: deliver same day updates. Well, obviously with the world of AI now and what we promise our clients, we can do this, right? I mean, this is the power of the technology we have to hand. So Lucy, what we could do is move into your last segue of data points and survey studies. And I think that subject will line quite nicely into your next area of the PowerPoint. Lucy.
Absolutely. And I think it does tie in exactly with listening to the client and seeing that how are moving. And that subject is, of course, AI. And it is where we see a gap again between the client side and the law firm side. What we see is that 53% of corporate legal teams report that organization-wide Gen AI usage. For law firms, the equivalent is 35%. 78% of corporate legal teams say AI should be applied in law firms, and 63% of law firm respondents agree. And this gap we're showing that 21% again. Only 21% of UK buyers are highly satisfied with their firm's innovative capabilities. That's below the global average of 33%. So UK buyers appear less satisfied with their firms than the global average. And I think that might seem a bit unfair because, I mean, I don't want to give my age away by saying how long I've been doing research in the market, but I have seen year on, we see that UK firms objectively are actually often ahead of their US counterpart in making changes, reacting to new technologies and so on. But I think the truth is that although firms move quicker than the rest of the world, often in the UK, so do the clients. The UK clients probably have higher expectations from from their firms than might be, potentially in the US. So, clients are starting to name that gap. It's not about using AI, but what's the impact on the client. And so what we're really hearing now is that, a year ago, law firm leaders and our clients are telling us not to use AI. And now, we've gone full circle and clients are saying, not only I want you to use AI, but I want to see the results. I want to see what impact that's going to have. And we're also seeing that only 18% of research respondents within UK law firms say that their firm is measuring ROI on tools. And I think the two numbers, the 21% and the 18% together, tell what's quite a consistent story. So firms are investing in AI, but the clients aren't in how they're being served. And so our kind of recommendation table at the bottom is to not just say, we use AI, but to demonstrate what impact the firm's use of AI is having on, cost predictability, cycle times, and when you're thinking about ROI, not focusing on the internal efficiency, but how it's improving outcomes for the client. And not framing it as a back office tool, really focusing fit for the client. And so those would be the ways that we'd kind of recommend thinking about ROI, rather than just, we can do the same work that we could previously do faster. And I think that potentially helps to get out of the conversation where some clients will be saying, well, if you use AI, why is the work not now cheaper? And turning that price conversation into more of a value conversation. So would love to hear everybody's thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you go back to slide 9, please? There's some interesting data points there. Just to sort of bring up. So just one that came to mind from my side, guys, is it's 78% of corporate legal teams believe AI should be applied to the law firms. So my question really is, are clients in that pitch experience that you're going through, or you're just generally working with the clients, are they asking you about your AI capabilities at the moment in how you interact with them? And if you don't have an answer, how do you give an answer in that space today? How do you see that, guys? Sam, from your side.
I think it's fair to say it's a mix, Ben. It's not absolutely everyone asking the question, but
78% are.
Well, they might not be asking directly, but the vast majority do, undoubtedly. It is a question that comes up certainly in the bigger tenders and in many others as well. I'd like to say that I'm not sure what the impact would be if we didn't have an answer, because we do.
Because it's so in demand now. This is what we're trying to say, is everyone's just assuming, or they want it. They don't know what they want, as we were discussing earlier, but they want this. They want this. Is it a tick box experience at the moment without getting into the weeds when you go through that tender process with an in-house?
No, I think there is a genuine qualitative assessment there as to what people are doing. I think
Nice.
if it's not just a do you use AI, yes, no, tick box. I think that would be really unhelpful for all involved. You don't always have an awful lot of words to articulate the story, and it's a complex story, so that can be a bit of a challenge at times. But ultimately, I think 78% seems quite low to me, really, in terms of how many people should think that this is applicable to law firms, because it should be far closer to 100%. The key thing is having the answer and making sure that you can put some examples and some detail behind that.
Yeah, Dale, are you surprised by this clear divide now between corporate teams and law firms with the usage at the moment in 2026?
No, because I think it's the time of the general counsel over law firms. Law firms are trying to juggle multiple clients' data, and including some that will say, don't do AI. Whereas, obviously, as a single GC, that data's your own. You've not got the same regulatory boundaries. You've not got the same challenges. You can feed that data. If you don't like the way the data is being used, you change your own questionnaire. Whereas for a law firm, they have to adhere by law to the questionnaires that are given. And so I remember being at a conference some years ago and saying that the smaller firms, the ones that control their data, are in a stronger position because they were like, oh, we're never going to be able to afford all this. But I think this is where the regulatory side is challenging for law firms, because exactly that, it's shared clients, shared data. I know every client would like to think they're the only client for a law firm, but they're just not. That's the harsh reality of it. So I'm not surprised at what I am surprised at, and it's slightly a bit divisive to Sam on this. I don't think it's complicated, but I think it's being made complicated. Everybody knows what the costs are of their AIs. They could just very simply divide it by the number of people and say that's their chargeable amount. And you know, photocopiers, you used to charge for the number of prints years ago. I don't know whether we're going to start charging for the AI usage, because the fact is it's not free, right? It is a chargeable product to the company. So I think the reason there's some opaqueness is because it's the fear of showing it's not completely justifiable. And so, in the fear of showing that, you'd sooner say nothing, avoid the question, hide, and I think that's where, again, there's got to be the trust comes from transparency, even if it's an uncomfortable conversation.
Mhm.
I think, I don't know, and again, GCs could keep me on point on this, but I think even if they don't like the answers, if it's not the answers they want to hear, at least an answer would be better than trying to avoid. So yeah, I'm not surprised at the stats, and
Yeah.
as I say, it is there. It's the GC's time in a way.
I think just on that divide as well, technology today is the easiest it's ever been to purchase. It's the easiest it's ever been to explore. The layers of prevention are a lot less in the in-house space to maybe law firms. I mean, Adam, from your side, you've adopted AI technology. I mean, the 63% believe AI should be applied to legal work. I hope in your firm it's near 100. Are they all happy people?
Yeah, well, that's those two questions are very different, I think, Ben. Our adoption rate is very high. Everybody in the firm uses the tools. I think the way in which individuals use the tools varies quite significantly. That we've got a kind of qualitative versus quantitative difference, where some people will use the tools very effectively and very regularly, and some people will use them for kind of low touch point things. So, what we really want to think, it's not just about adoption; it's trying to get people to leverage the tools to get the most out of them,
Yeah.
and that's an ongoing exercise. And we touched on this briefly earlier. I think it becomes more and more challenging because the tools are developing that quickly. Just as you get to a comfort point about how you're using something, we're telling them that the dial's been turned.
Yeah.
So that kind of speed of change presents
it's so fast
challenges.
at the moment. You go on holiday and you come back and there's a new feature. Lucy, can you go to slide 10, the final slide in this discussion, please? Because going back to what you were just saying there, Adam, about the adoption usage, we're seeing here 80% of usage is still around legal research, then document review, then summarization. Is that a fair assessment of, and the same question to Sam, of your overarching usage of AI technology today in your firms?
I think different teams sorry, go on.
No, after you, Adam.
I was just going to say, I think different teams use it in very different ways. So, kind of the contentious teams lean heavily in on the research tools and things like that, whereas the transactional teams are more about workflow, large document review on kind of due diligence exercises and things like that. So I think, each department operates in its own slightly kind of unique way, in a very broad sense. And I think as a result, their AI usage and the benefit that they derive from them varies significantly as well.
Yeah, fair. Sam, from your side, usage across the firm in terms of areas of the platform?
Yeah, on an aggregated basis, document review would be the most common use case. Legal research is also very strong. I think that probably changes through the adoption journey as well. I think for many lawyers, legal research is quite an interesting entry point into Gen AI, because you're not asking it to draft something for you that you're going to put your name to or have to redraft. You are really just asking it to help you with the legal research, and people have gradually got used to using a range of tools to do that over the years, and this is just an absolutely turbocharged version of that.
Yeah. That makes sense. Now, final one before we get into sort of the last stages of the presentation, return on investment. 18% of your law firms are measuring ROI on their tools. I mean, that I don't believe people are getting true ROI data yet. I don't think we've had platforms long enough in the ecosystem to really gauge that return on investment. But 18% are apparently now measuring it. Dale, if you were measuring ROI, what sort of things would you be thinking about from a return on investment in this tech stack in AI right now?
It's going to be a very simplified answer, so I don't hope
You're on the
too
clock.
disappointing, but I would just create a digital workforce and treat them as employees and measure them accordingly as a digital workforce of employees. You would cost them accordingly. You could charge them or show the qualitative element, to Adam's point earlier, of how you're not charging for that. But I think whilst we keep thinking this is a tool, a bit like what is it, Grammarly or whatever tools, whilst you keep thinking it as a tool, you're never going to treat it with what it actually is, which is becoming an additional worker in your orchestra of people. And so the minute it starts getting the due respect it should be, I think it will then be easier to assess, easier to scope, easier to price out.
Exactly.
I think this blended model is really opaque. And as we talked about on one of the previous calls before this, is you're going to get your rainmakers that are absolutely wanting that partnership status, and they're going to use the tools to every nth degree to demonstrate their worth. You're going to get others go, if I use this too much, I'm going to cost myself my job. I'm going to have to be a bit more measured in how I approach this. And I'm maybe not trying for partnership at the moment. I'm just trying to pay my mortgage tomorrow. So there's a lot of psychology around that. So that's why I would create the digital workforce, because that starts to remove the emotion and remove the psychology, but does seem like a very oversimplified answer.
Thank you. I'm very conscious we could talk for hours on this subject, and I'm sure people will be releasing books and webinars and all sorts of things on the back of this, but who knows? Lucy, let's jump back to you for the last two slides of the session before we finish at past.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yes. So to summarize, when you read the report that we've been talking about, you'll see 4 imperatives based on the research. So these are recommendations for law firms. I know not everybody on this call today are in firms. Some of you are in-house, but you could ask yourselves whether your needs are clear to the firms that you work with, and which firms are delivering. So number 1, in a more cautious market, the key is going to be to engage clients early, even before demand is fully defined. So firms that wait for formal mandates will be competing on price, but whereas those that are already in the room will shape the brief. Number 2, GCs are increasingly judged on commercial impact, and they're evaluating their firms in the same way. So connecting legal advice to the decisions it enables, whether that's risk reduction, revenue acceleration, and so on, is really what's needed. Number 3, access to information is cheap nowadays. What clients value most is interpretation. It's timely, it's relevant, it's specific to their business. So moving beyond periodic briefings to embedded proactive engagement. And then when it comes to AI, number 4, clients aren't just looking for AI adoption, they're looking for outcomes. So they're looking for firms that demonstrate the impact through cycle times, cost predictability, the quality of the insight. Not we use AI, but what it delivers. And so that is the end of my data. So just bringing up a slide here with a little bit more information about the Thomson Reuters Institute. There's a QR code if you want to go straight to download the report. Our function within Thomson Reuters also produces bespoke reports and advisory services. So if anyone listening is interested in that, please do contact my colleague Catherine Watson. But I am also available for any questions about the research itself, either if we have time now, which we probably don't, or feel free to contact me after this.
Lucy, thank you so much. I think we're running out of time frantically on the hour. We could have talked for another hour at least on some of the subjects that we've covered today. I'd like to take this moment just to thank everyone for taking the time out of their days, joining the call, and the panelists who have taken up their time to contribute some ideas, opinions, and thoughts around some of these data points. And of course, Netlaw Media, who helped produce today's session. It's been really great to speak with you all. Once again, I would say that if you haven't taken a QR code of the report, it's worthwhile reading. I believe you will all be sent to a link from your from the people that have registered. Without further ado, really just thought I'd end with a bit of a thought, really, not for the panelists, but for those who've attended, and just ask yourself a question. I was thinking about this the other day. If a client asks you today to prove what value you delivered this year, not just what you've built, but the commercial outcomes your advice actually enabled, what would you be able to show them? And that's just something to think about. We think about this all the time in my world about value we bring to our clients. And I really think into this new world, value in what you're bringing to your clients and the value that clients are expecting to receive is going to create the winners and losers in this market moving forward, because technology now is the great leveler. And that's how I really see things as we go forward into 26 and beyond. Thank you much for your time, everybody. And I hope to see you all soon. Thanks very much.